The opinions expressed on the radio program by the host, co-hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions and responsibility of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Genesis Radio, www.genesisradio.com, Genesis Radio's owners, management, or affiliates.
Good evening, and here we are again at GenesisRadio.com. It's 5 o'clock, always time to rock. This evening, we have a young lady on. Her name is Miss Kira Bradford. Great. Hello, how are you, young lady?
How are you guys? I'm doing well, thank you. Can you see me?
Yes, we can
okay.
see.
Oh, sorry.
Can you see me?
I can. I'm glad I know that you can see me.
Well, there you go. We seem to be good. My name is Mr. Kendall Stevenson. I'm alongside Mr. Dr. Yates. What's going on, brother?
Nothing much. How's everybody's week going?
It's going well.
Good.
Good.
My week was actually pretty good, brother.
Oh, good. Glad to hear that.
Yeah. I got a little extra work this week, so I'm happy.
There you go.
Right. Just to let you guys know, we are politricking. We are on GenesisRadio.com, and we are part of Unity in the Community. We are here to inform the community about what's going on politically, and to talk real talk about what's going on politically. So, you and I were having this conversation. I'd like you to chime in whenever you want to, Miss Gray. You and I were having a conversation, and it was talking about transsexual. Now, we were off the mic. Yes. So you gave me a scenario as to, I put locks on my doors, and I place a firearm, and these things I do as a preventive measure. And I told you, about the data, because now the data, it does state that people have robbed your house. So it's a means of protection for something that has already happened. But the things that the transsexuals are being blamed for and being ridiculed for and attacked for, these things never happen.
Well, we were talking about, just to bring you in, Mrs. Bradford Gray, we were talking about the transgender agenda, if you will, in the context of politics and how it affected the Democrats in their recent laws, which turned out to be pretty much a landslide for the Republicans. And what I was saying is that right now, the Democratic Party, I said last week that the Democrats, at least for right now, are pretty much dead in the water, right? The Democratic Party is going to have to undergo, like on ABC, an extreme makeover if they are to be relevant in the future, right? Or should I say the near future? Now, in getting back to what you were saying, right, about the LGBTQ agenda, if you will.
I'll tell you, I can never get that right. I just always the alphabet.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not 100%, but I think it's LGBTQ.
I apologize for all of them, and this is on me. But for some reason, I can never get the letters in sequence. Maybe it's because I have dyslexia. You think that maybe it?
Well, that's what we're going to chalk it up to.
But what I was saying was that in our debate, that the Democratic Party has, since probably the mid to late 70s, been a party that has basically hitched their fortunes to the Democratic Party. You have labor, you have so-called minorities, you have immigrants, and you have the working class that gravitated toward the Democratic Party. So goes the Democratic Party, so go these groups that hitch themselves. And one of the things that I saw in this last election was the Democrats want to be the party that has a really big umbrella. And they want to invite everybody under this umbrella. The problem is you're not going to fit everyone. Some people are going to be left out in the rain. And the people that are left out in the rain are looking at the other members under the umbrella and saying, you know what? We may not have much in common other than our political affiliation. And I think that one of the things that hurt the Democrats was things like Kamala Harris stating that she thinks that transgenders in jail should be afforded the opportunity to have gender reassignment surgery. I think the fact that there are now gender neutral bathrooms, that biological men are hoping to compete against biological women in contact sports, I think all that hurt the Democratic Party. And I think that unless that extreme makeover happens, and the Democrats may have to shed some of their, I guess, some of their support, if that's what's going to take to win. I mean, what do you think? Because you ran a candidacy.
So I think the Republicans were masterful in creating a narrative as if the Democrats were going to be the party of all people that are not what I would call quote unquote norm. And what does that mean for the quote unquote white Christian, dominant party people in this? That means that our pie is getting smaller. If transgender people are getting more opportunities at free health care for their procedures, that means that it's coming out in our pot. That means that we're going to have to be paying for this. And so it's not, I don't think it's so much as people being who they want to be if it doesn't mess with my life. I think it's more of the narrative is the more others come in, the less you get. And they did a great job at doing that. I think where we went wrong is we didn't do a good job at showing how much of this is going to be on the Republicans' problem as well. Because when we talked about a transgender person getting gender affirming care in jail, that person actually got that care under the Trump administration. And I wish we would have come back to talk about when and where that person actually did get that care. And it was under the Trump administration. So this is not a singular party issue. These people, anybody who is a person, is going to be living in our society under any administration. And they actually have rights, whether or not people like to agree with it or not. As a person, you have rights, alienable rights that you're born with. And what you do with those rights, how far you advance those rights under any administration is going to be what you're able to get from it. So I agree with you in part that, they masterfully use this as propaganda in a way that Democrats wouldn't think to do against them. And we need to get better at that because we have to fight fire with fire. We want to be the inclusive party because I remember there was a long time ago, African Americans, while we were part of the Republican Party, we found ourselves not being valued or our policies and opportunities not being there in the Republican Party, which is why we switched to the Democratic Party. And then we became a major majority in the Democratic Party, more consistent and expansive. And I'll tell you, the Democrats didn't want all those blacks at that point, but we created and continue to push and advance our togetherness on certain issues such as job security, benefits, certain security benefits, safety nets. But the Republican Party is now being able to use this in a crafty way that the Democrats need to catch up with.
Well, it seems to me as if the two parties have sort of switched sides. And I say that because for the Democrats, you go back to the 50s and 60s, the Democrats were the Dixiecrats. These were the people who would not even consider a single piece of legislation aimed at ending segregation or granting black people, any rights whatsoever. It wasn't until Lyndon Johnson and the signing of the Voting Rights Act and then the Civil Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act and then the Voting Rights Act, that Lyndon Johnson said, I just lost the South. Right. And once that happened, everybody flocked to the Republican Party because they no longer had, I guess, a commonality with the Democrats. So now the Republicans during that time were the party of reason. It was the Republican Party that did things like establishing the EPA. It was the Republican Party that pushed for ending, for the 13th Amendment, for the Emancipation Proclamation. That was the Republican Party. You wouldn't recognize that in today's Republican Party.
Sure wouldn't.
But now in the Democratic Party, I guess you have, I guess, an opposite but equal form of extremism. And, for Black people in this country, again, we've hitched our fortunes to the Democrats. But I think in this last election, I think that so many Black people, who, by the way, Black people are very much conservative, right, in our thinking.
Or left or center.
Yeah, well, growing up, right, there were certain standards that were expected from us. Right?
That are still expected from us. Expected.
You don't see it so much anymore, right? I go to a store and I see people wearing like a bonnet on their head. They wear pajamas and things like that.
You're always going to have certain.
Yes.
Growing up, in my home,
they were do-rags.
I can wear do-rag in the street. My father was
but we saw people doing that often, and it was equivalent to the bonnets of this time.
We did, but I'm just talking about for the most part, right? Now, I'm a child of the 60s, right? So for me, growing up, that was before the exodus of Black men from the community. So there were certain standards that were expected of us, certain codes of conduct that were expected from us young men because we had the example right in front of us. We don't necessarily have that today. So by nature, we would consider ourselves somewhat conservative, leaning conservative, part of those Christian values that were given to us. So I think that a lot of us, at least this last election, looked the other way, and turned away from the Democratic Party and voted for somebody like Trump.
Again, we had that conversation, and we broke it down. I tell you, the reason why a lot of people voted for Trump, it was a lot of manipulation. It was a whole lot of things, but basically, it was out of fear. He made you afraid of something. He made you afraid of Kamala Harris because she kept saying that she was a communist. So now the Cuban men don't want to vote for her because they know what communist is.
Right.
And I told you that she kept using words that didn't resonate with the common man. When you start talking about being a fascist, most people don't even know what the heck that is. Okay. So these type of words that she was using didn't resonate with them. But what did resonate with the people was when you talk money. How much am I got to go spend at the store? How much is it? That was the common man. And she didn't really get to that, but Donald Trump did. He did it by taking credit for somebody else's work, but he still did it. And he went out and talked to the common man. And then when he told the common man, I know you're angry, because first I hit you with fear, then I see that you're angry, and only I can fix it.
Well, you know what? You're saying basically the same thing I'm saying. That because for those reasons, a lot of people who have for generations supported the Democratic Party saw something in this election that led them to go into the Republican camp. Now, how do you get them back?
Or not vote at all?
That's the question.
Well, here's what I do think. I think we're going to have 4 years to see all of those things that people think are going to be cured that are probably not going to be cured because there is no plan to cure it. You haven't heard one word about an economic plan since the election has been decided. And in fact, all we've heard more about was deportation plans and other plans that really have not much to do with the everyday working class person, unless you think illegal immigrants are actually stealing your Black jobs. And if that's what you think, then good luck, because many people don't want those jobs screwing and Tonka heads on little, Chinese dolls. But hey, if that's your Black job that you think these immigrants are taking, then you're going to be, someone who voted for the Republican Party. However, I want to make sure that people understand what our economy is right now, how stable it is while the Democratic administration is in there. And we hear Trump talking about tariffs, this, tariffs, that. Many people don't even know what that means or how it applies to them in terms of tariffs. But we are going to understand one thing for sure. A tariff's trickle-down effect is how the businesses pass on their costs to the consumers. So when things don't start to go down, you have to start paying more for, paper and toilet tissue and napkins. We're going to start to feel that. And we'll see where people exit after that part. But I will say that I want to see how the Republican Party handles transgender people that live in our country. They're not going anywhere. They're not going to be shipped to an island. So they're going to have to deal with the issues that are presented and the challenges that are presented in this group of people that have now been able to come forth and say who they believe they are based on whatever their identity positions are. You know, this is the same. When I'm a child of the 70s. You know, my uncle was probably the first gay dude I ever knew. We couldn't even say he was gay, even though we knew it. So these are the same transitions that we have gone through with people who start to have differences in their individualism than we do. Now the question is, how much of the pie are we splitting with them? And I think the Democrats have to get smarter and say, we're not splitting any pie with them. We are always pushing our dollars into some direction. Some may be helpful to us, some may be not individually. But collectively, do I want a person to commit suicide because they can't do what they want to do? Or do I want a person to shoot up a school because no one is allowing them to be who they are? And versus, do I want to give them healthcare access just like everybody else?
Well, now, see, I'm going to tell you something, Ron. Now, you brought this to my attention once before. We talked about history repeating itself.
Correct.
Because this argument has happened before.
Sure.
But see, now you take away transgender and put black people. It was the same.
Right. Well, you know what?
We don't want you in our bathrooms. We don't want you to use our bathrooms.
In our schools, on our buses, on our trains.
We don't want to touch you. We don't want you to rub up against us because they thought they were going to get some kind of disease from us. So the prejudice is something that's just been recycled. You just change the people.
That's it. I agree.
I think the circumstances are somewhat different, right? And you said you want to know how the Republicans are going to deal with transgenderism. I think I might have some insight. I think perhaps they will deal with transgender the same way they're dealing with black people right now. So what do they do in terms of things like critical race theory? You can't teach it. What about Black history in our schools? That's going away. What about books by Black authors dealing with our history that does not begin with the slave trade? That's going away as well. So if you take people, if we are from the root and part of the tree, if you tell people the tree doesn't exist anymore, and you tell them that, listen, the stories that you learned from wherever about a glorious history of Black people throughout the diaspora, well, that doesn't exist anymore. If you want to talk about Columbus coming to this country and destroying the indigenous culture as well as killing the people, well, that doesn't exist anymore either. So if you're going to do that for Black people, for indigenous people, you can do the same thing with the LGBTQ community.
I agree with you, but I think it's propaganda. I think what this is really about is DEI, and that has everything to do with us. There's way too much. Do you know that as soon as when Biden got into office, one of his first executive orders was to push DEI practices in every federal program. As a result, 90 federal agencies had a DEI action plan. And many of those things were met with extreme resistance. There were probably more complaints by white people about DEI practices than there were in the history of the United States during that time frame. And now Trump has vowed, Project 2025 has vowed to remove DEI from all federal agencies, which means a certain percentage of contracts don't have to go to minority businesses or minority stakeholders. A certain amount of anything that the federal government has to offer doesn't have to go to minority owned anything. And so as I think we push out this, oh, you don't want them because of the LGBTQ, this is really about us, because many people don't want us to be prioritized in many of the government's business and affairs or private businesses. And you've seen the backlash on that. And I do think this is where a lot of the Trump folks came into network. They knew this was something that was on the agenda, and they were gonna make sure that they pushed back on this.
Well, you know, that's always been on the agenda. And I think one of the problems that we have as a Black community, as a Black family, is we have not taken the initiatives on ourselves to do for ourselves. So here we are. We're arguing about, are we going to teach critical race theory? Are we going to teach Black history? Why don't we have our own schools where we set the curriculum? Why don't we have our own healthcare facilities where sisters can go and don't have to die waiting for care, feminine care?
Because they would call that segregation.
We are still relying on the government, which has throughout our sojourn in this country demonstrated a lack of interest, a lack of care for Black people, for brown people, for immigrants, for poor people. And yet here we are still waiting for the crumbs to fall off the table.
Mm-hmm.
We, as a Black people, we generate $1 trillion.
We're the biggest consumers
every year. And where the hell is it? It's going to Macy's. It's going to Tommy Hilfiger. It's going to Nike. It's not going to rebuild our communities. Now, you're down there in Philly, correct?
I am.
Okay. So all that money going in Philly, I go down to Max's to get my my cheesesteaks.
Right.
I don't see any economic development in that part of Philadelphia. Maybe in the other part of Philadelphia.
Max's.
Down where Max's is.
I said, right? Boo, Max's. I know these are my opinions only, not the ones of Kendall and Rod.
Okay. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Before we go, I got to give people, your listeners, a good cheesesteak spot when they come to Philly.
Right. We just got to let people know who we are. Thank you for tuning in to GenesisRadio.com. If you'd like to give us a call to tune in, please give us a call at 888-304-4401. This evening, again, we have Miss Kira Bradford-Gray, you have Mr. Kendall Stevenson, and Dr. Yates. And we're here chopping it up about what's going on in politics, some real talk. Thank you.
I have a question for you. Actually, it's a legal question. So I'm a retired police officer. My jurisdiction did not extend to Pennsylvania. Okay. So when I came into this state, I was told there was something known as a legal blood draw when a person is stopped for suspected driving under the influence. So after listening to
sounds like stop and frisk.
Well, it's
stop and frisk. You're going invasive. Frisk is the outer pockets.
Is a violation of both the Fourth and Fifth Amendment. Because one, you tell people if you are under the influence, you should not sign a contract because you lack the capacity to understand. Mm-hmm. Yet you tell me that I have to consent to an invasive search, drawing my blood mm-hmm. without a warrant, which violates my Fourth Amendment right. Then you tell me I have to give you consent to do this, right? Which I think violates my Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. So I asked the police officer, and one of them told me, well, as a resident of the state of Pennsylvania, you have a driver's license, which gives you the privilege to drive.
Yes, that's true.
So it is, but I don't understand the concept of compliant consent simply because I want to drive a car. So can you explain to me how that is not a violation of the Fourth and Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution?
Driving is a privilege. It is not a right, but it's not
driving is a privilege, but your right not to be incriminated in a criminal matter is a right, a constitutional right. And so what I know here in Pennsylvania, that's not the case. You can refuse, but you will get an administrative license suspension for refusing to consent to any breathalyzer tests or any invasive intrusion into your bodily fluids. So mm-hmm. It is kind of function to say, now the administrative license suspension can be overcome if you hire a lawyer and you tell reasons why you didn't consent, but it's still an administrative process that you have to go through, and most times you cannot overcome that rebuttable inference. And when I say rebuttable inference, it means you need some serious reason as to why you didn't consent other than I just didn't want to. So it does function as penalizing someone for exercising their constitutional rights, and it is a problem.
And that's my point, right? I have a right to remain silent. I have a right to have you present a warrant or request a warrant from a judge if you want to draw fluids from my body. And the state of Pennsylvania and other states now are saying You do not have that right if you drive a car. However, I do not surrender my constitutional rights when I get behind the wheel of my vehicle.
So you would rather pay the cost of a lawyer and all of that, because that's going to probably cost you a lot more money.
I would refuse to take that test simply because what evidence do you present at trial to show my level of intoxication if you do not have the test to prove it?
You mean they can't do that visually? They can't say that you would appear to be?
They can say, but that is not definitive proof. That is just the officer's observation. And what happens if I'm diabetic? What happens if I say suffer from seizures? I have some sort of neurological deficit.
They're not doctors. They can't determine.
That's my point.
Mm-hmm.
They can only go according to their observation, right? And based on that, that is not proof that I am operating under the influence.
But I think if you were diabetic or any one of those things, I don't think you would refuse. Well, I think you would let them know that right away. Hey, I'm diabetic or whatever.
Right.
You know, I think that was something that would be known right on the table. But if I was a diabetic, I got pulled over and I seem to be intoxicated, and if they ask for a blood test and I know I'm not drunk or anything, and I know I'm a diabetic, I think I would consent.
I think that's one of the problems, that we surrender our rights.
Yeah.
Right. And as long as you're willing to surrender those rights, when does it end? You know, I can't remember
exactly it. And I'm so glad you said that. So here, you know, some people think we have to have either or. We can't have public safety and fairness to people, that we can't have both. And I do disagree. Now, I understand there's some practical realities that we have to deal with. So if you're driving a car, it's transit, right? So
Right.
I could either get your consent or I can hold you till I get a warrant, you know, because even if I get a warrant, I may not be able to find you, and whatever's in your system may be gone for me to prove that you were driving drunk. So there is a practical analysis that has to be made about what's the best way to deal with this. But it should never be that I have to give up my rights because you're suspecting me of something. And when I say my rights, these are major life-changing decisions that are being made when people are put into a justice system, even if they come out on the other side not guilty, because there's so many collateral consequences to being arrested, to being unable to do certain things while you have the arrest pending, whatever that is. And I shouldn't have to tell them myself, because you're saying that in order for me to drive, I got to make sure that, you know, I make it easy for you to prosecute me. I know that sounds a little odd, you know, basically saying that, look, if I'm doing wrong, I don't have to tell them myself. But that is the very basic principle of our rights to remain silent. I don't have to tell on myself because you're accusing me. Now, people say, well, if you ain't doing nothing wrong, what's the big deal? But there's a lot of nuance in that, because a lot of people is not necessarily committing crimes. I don't need to have anything that would allow me to put myself in motion of the criminal justice system when I shouldn't be there. And I do think that there's individual situations where we have allowed, you know, rights to be kind of watered down in one area, and it's made a big impact on another area. But I tell you one thing, the one place where we never touch or delineate rights is Second Amendment. Those rights must be anointed by Jesus, man. They don't go nowhere. They don't get interpreted any way. No one has ever watered it down, even though the Constitution has never said individuals should possess these types of weapons. It's supposed to be a militia. Yes. And last I checked, most of these people walking around with guns are not in a militia. Yeah. But for some reason, those rights are the holy grail.
Well, let me ask you a question here. Where do you think we're headed in Pennsylvania as far as our politics are concerned? You know, I understand we still have possession of the House or control of the House.
One person majority. And I mean, I don't know what that's going to do other than stop the Republicans from doing some real damage. But it's really because we don't have the Senate. It's not like we're going to be able to advance a lot of bills that could help protect us, because we still need the Senate to approve those bills. But at the very least, they can stop the Republicans from doing things like putting an amendment in the Pennsylvania state constitution to ban abortion. Or they can stop the Republicans from saying, we're no longer going to accept or make hospitals accept pre-existing conditions. You know, if they get state-funded Medicaid or Medicare. There are things that the House majority can stop. But where we need to go with our politics is we need to learn from what happened. We need to make sure that we understand that our messaging has got to change. And we have to make sure that we meet people where they are. See, we didn't focus on building our base. We thought we were going to have the same people that we had before. And like he said, like Ron said, some of these people jumped ship because they didn't like the direction that we were going as a party and being way overly inclusive and talking about things that they weren't comfortable with. However, those things don't go away. Each party has to deal with it. They just don't talk about it as much as we did. But now we have to figure out, well, where are the rest, the people who sat out, the people who didn't vote? How do we build our base with them? How do we talk to them? Where do they meet? Where is their information being given and driven? And I think we need to do that. Another thing that I really was heavily critical on the Democratic Party is that they did not make sure, in the Harris campaign, I brought this up continuously. They did not make sure that every eligible voter had a process to vote. We should have been looking at voter protections and voter access in things from the very beginning of Kamala Harris starting. And so what we did is we skipped a lot of people in these county jails who have the right to vote, but there's no process. There's over 8,000 people alone in Philadelphia county jails. And now, even if there's 2,000 in all 67 county jails, there's a lot of eligible voters who probably did not, over 77% of them did not cast a vote. Not because they didn't want to, but because there's no process. That's one group. But think about all the other people who sat out. There were so many registered Democrats who just didn't come out. They didn't vote for Trump. They didn't vote for us. So what is it going to take to get back with them and build our base back up?
Well, you know what? I can answer for one of them because I'm one of those people that set out this election.
Yeah, please tell me why.
And I did so for two reasons. One, I could not bring myself to vote for Donald Trump. See, I'm a registered independent.
Mm-hmm.
I could not bring myself to vote for Donald Trump. My conscience would not allow me to do that. Mm-hmm. For Kamala Harris, one thing that there's only one reason why I did not vote for her, and that was because of the Democrats' handling of the situation in what's called the Middle East.
And what about that you think that would be better under the Republican regime?
I don't know if it'll be better, but what I do know is I'm supporting a family that is in Gaza, that is fighting every day to stay alive. He sends me pictures of bombs exploding in the next refugee camp. And I see pictures of, pieces of children, the remains of children that have been blown to bits by American-made ordnance. Mm-hmm. I could not bring myself to vote for a party that will continue the carnage when I'm trying to keep this man, his family alive, so that maybe they can tell the story after this is over of what it was like for them when Israel launched this attack. Yeah. So because of that, they lost my vote. Because even though I am an independent, have been that way for over 20, 25 years, on many issues, I lean toward the Democrats because I think that on some of these issues, the Republicans are a bit too far extreme for me, a bit too far to the right. So I give deference to the Democrats. But on this was a line out I just couldn't cross.
Well, I think like this, the genocide is going to stop when Israel decides to stop it. Now, I told you before, if a person commits murder and I give them the tools to do so, especially if I know that they commit murder, that makes me just as guilty. Mm-hmm. So if Netanyahu, if he's a war criminal, then so are the people that supply him with the arms. That I say.
So what you're saying is that Joe Biden
is a war criminal.
Kamala Harris.
Well, I don't know. Kamala Harris is number two.
She is the vice president.
Yeah, but she's
right, but she's not the driver, but she is the vice president. So I agree. It's Joe Biden's policy. It's Joe Biden's administration.
It is the administration.
And now it's going to become Trump's administration.
Okay.
So now if this war continues on and we continue to give those arms, which I don't think we're going to stop, I don't think that's going to happen. So if we continue to give those arms, now that makes him a war criminal too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so now what happens next?
Well, here's my question is, so what, you didn't want to vote for a person because of the genocide.
Right.
You wanted that to be stopped.
Right.
You got people on one side who are actually every day, even though they're supplying them arms, but every day they're out there trying to get these ceasefires and these deals done, and they keep running into obstacles.
Who's that?
Kamala Harris and them.
She's not. Listen, let's be realistic.
So you're saying the administration is not over there trying to get a peace deal?
No real attempt at getting a ceasefire.
Let's be realistic. Wait, how are we going to say that?
If we wanted to stop this carnage, all we would have had to do was cut off funding to Israel in terms of their ability to make war against the Palestinians.
I don't believe it's that easy.
Years ago, because all of the ordnance that they are dropping, all of the bullets that are fired are American made. We are the primary supporter of Israel as it relates to their arms industry.
We're the primary supporter of the world as it relates to their arms industry.
I'm sorry, I didn't say.
We are the primary supplier of the world as it relates to their arms industries.
Well, not necessarily anymore, right? Because now you have Russia that is developing weapons and supplying those places like Iran. You have North Korea that is developing weapons and is currently in Ukraine fighting alongside Russian soldiers. So there are other sources of armaments that Israel could rely upon, but the fact is they don't have to, because they know that we are going to supply them with arms. Even though we say that we are the last bastion of democracy, if you want to call it that, we are still slaughtering innocent people and looking away while it happens. And the reason I say that there's no real effort on the part of this country to end this carnage is because we look the other way, because the other
let me say this.
Or should I say the other colonial powers look the other way while we did it here. To the indigenous people, to black people, to poor people. They looked the other way.
I don't know.
They looked the other way in South Africa when they were killing people in Soweto, in the townships. The world looked the other way. The world is looking the other way in Gaza. They're telling us, oh, pay attention to, okay, I get it. Global warming is a major issue. Pay attention to that, but not the slaughter of these children.
I think they did a lot of good coverage on the slaughter of the children. I think they did a lot of good coverage on that. And our administration was forced to answer questions that no other administration had to do. But I'm going to say this. I had to do my quick search. The United States is the world's largest arms exporter, accounting for 41.7% of international arms sales between 2018 and 2023. So when Trump was in office, it was going up. It increased from 34% in 2014 to 2018 and 42% from 2018 to 2020. So this is, these are issues that are not a Republican Democrat issue. This is an America issue. And no matter what party gets in, they're still going to do the same thing, what we're known for. I mean, exports are what gives us money. We are a capitalist country. And I think people are branding Democratic values versus Republican values. When this is America, this is what America is, and we need to be realistic about what America is. But I'll say this: I do think the war on Gaza and the things that were going on got a lot of airplay. There's a lot of news media that was not shut down under the Biden administration, showing the graphics and the images. I know CNN had it on all the time. They had reporters out there reporting on what was happening on the ground, so that the American people understood that this was terrible. And it is still terrible. But I know one thing: this administration is no friend of the Palestinians. This administration is no friend of anyone in the Middle East other than Israel. Trump has already made that clear. So we're going to see a real, I don't even think there's going to be a ceasefire being talked about under this administration, because they don't care. They believe that land belongs to Israel.
Well, okay. We're going to step away from that for now, because we have limited time.
Oh, okay, yes.
So, Trump has talked about the largest roundup and deportation in U.S. history. To me, This is echoes of what happened in Nazi Germany when people were rounded up in mass and transported to concentration camps and labor camps around Europe. Also, there's some talk that Trump wants to change at least the constitutional amendment. I believe it's the 14th
Amendment,
dealing with birth and being granted citizenship by virtue of birth in this country. So what do you think's going to happen? I mean, realistically, the Democrats right now aren't going to have much say in this. Right now, the Republicans have control of the White House, both houses of Congress, and let's be realistic,
the Supreme
Court as well.
That's right.
All branches of the government are controlled by the Republican Party.
Yeah. And agencies like ICE, like FBI, like those who are going to be effectuating these things. So, yeah.
I just wonder how they're going to pay for it, because you're talking about mass deportation. That's got to be like really, really expensive. So if they're going to use taxpayers' dollars, that means I'm going to be paying more money out of my.
I love what you just said, right? Because everything costs. So as Trump was claiming that the illegal immigrants are coming in and costing us a lot of money, I think when I was looking at it, and I want to go drill deeper into the economics, I saw that there are a lot of people that were here working, paying into benefits and not getting certain healthcare benefits and other benefits. So it was kind of breaking even. But now this mass deportation thing is going to go on. How much do you think we're going to spend on trying to house people in federal encampments? You got to feed them, you got to house them, and you got to treat them humanely. That costs a hell of a lot of money. There's a reason why, even just taking it from what we know about penal systems, there's a reason why that's the largest cost of any state budget, the correctional institutions, because it costs a lot to run them. It costs a lot to keep them going. And so if we start to think that our tax, we don't want the transgenders to get our money, but we're okay with this deportation plan that's going to cost us even more because maybe one day we won't have immigrants anymore that we have to house. I don't even understand how this is going to be able to be sold. And I think this is where the Democrats need to pick up on understanding how to create the narrative of what we are spending and what we're not spending, and how much are we better off for that. So that's what I want to know.
Now, let me ask you a question. You said that you have to treat them humanely.
Yes.
Right? Okay. A lot of the correctional facilities in this country aren't treating inmates from this country humanely. Right. For people who are not citizens, the Constitution does not say anything about treating them humanely. That refers to American citizens. So
I think the 8th Amendment talks about anyone who is in our custody. So if they can't get out, they are our responsibility.
So we have people in custody in Guantanamo. How humanely did we treat them? And some of them are.
But we don't. Yeah, I can't talk about what they did in Guantanamo Bay, right? Because I think that was a whole other crazy operation that got shut down when we learned about what was going on. You know, obviously there's going to be outlying things that happen. But quite frankly, when I say humanely, I don't mean that everybody is being treated humanely. I think there's a basic standard. And if they fall below those standards, here comes the lawsuits. Remember, these are all trickle down issues for people that are going to be suing on behalf of those people who are either harmed or die or something happens to them. We're on the hook, not only to feed, shelter, and allow them at least some opportunity to bathe, but we are on the hook for whatever happens to them catastrophically. So these things are not going to happen in a vacuum. We're going to start seeing a lot more issues arising about the way they implement this, if it is even implemented. Remember, why are we acting like we know that Trump is going to do everything he claims he's going to do, especially since he said he's building a wall that never got finished in 4 years? I don't understand why we are really counting on Trump to fix problems when he didn't fix anything when he was in the last 4 years.
And I tell you something, if you look at the people that he's starting to look into his cabinet, I'm just wondering if he's going to sexoffenders.com, because half the people he wants to put in his cabinet, they're sex offenders. I mean, you started out with Matt Gaetz, and you got the next guy, now the next guy. It's like, birds of a feather, all flocking together.
Yeah.
Well, I think as it relates to immigration, I think what happened several years ago when they were separating families, a lot of children were left behind while parents were returned to their country of origin. Is there now? I know Trump is saying that there is going to be a plan in place, something like what Obama implemented the Dreamer, so that children who are born in this country might be able to stay. But for these children who are minors, what happens to them
Yeah.
if the parents are going to be sent back?
Yeah, right. That's a good question
Yeah,
because
and it's like, so what do they go into? Department of Human Services or Children and Youth, right? And so what's that going to do, right? I don't think these things are very well thought out. And I think he says things to get the elections going, to talk as talking points. But when do talking points become practical policies and practical processes? And that's what we have yet to see. He can go another 4 years and still not implement that. I look, I'm not the one that doesn't think we need a comprehensive, real plan for people to be coming in and getting their citizenship or getting things that they need. I do believe we need that because I do believe places like New York were busting at the seams for people fleeing, and they were just being dropped off, and they couldn't house everyone. And you
Hmm.
saw a lot of the homeless population were the immigrant population, and that's nothing that we want to have, in our communities either. People dying on the streets because we can't take care of them. So these are real catch-22 issues, but it does start with having a better policy in place and beefing up resources to process people through that pathway to citizenship.
But do we have those resources? So something
We do.
Kendall and I have in common. We're both veterans.
Yeah.
So some of these people that are lying on the street are veterans. Some of
Yeah.
them
That too.
in this country. So I might have a bit of a problem. In fact, I do have a bit of a problem when I see a homeless veteran out on the street and someone who just got off a bus from Texas, who was kicked out by their governor, sent to New York, getting a place to stay, and the homeless and the veteran still out on the street.
Well,
And
yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been in some of these veteran facilities.
I absolutely have. I
Mm.
represented thousands of veterans who unfortunately had to have contact with the criminal justice system because of mental health or drug addiction. So yes, I know that population very well.
And also that wasn't that was more from state to state. I don't think that was issued by the federal government. I don't think the administration told Texas to send their people.
No, they didn't.
No.
Okay.
They didn't. That was Governor Abbott.
Right.
Making
I just
that-
want to
making
put
that-
I just want to give credit where credit was due. Okay.
Yeah, that's
was,
Governor Abbott's
right.
decision.
He made a decision, and the reason why when they got off the bus and they were able to get into a shelter or some sort of housing, that was also a decision by Mayor Adams.
Mhm.
So
Right.
again, that was their decision. That was not a governmental decision.
No, I get that.
Okay.
Well, I'm just saying that, in terms of resources, America, even though we want to present to the world that we have unlimited resources, let's be realistic. This country is $37 trillion in debt. Children that are born
We keep printing that paper, right?
exactly.
Mhm.
So children that are born today are born with a price tag on their head already. You are now responsible for your portion of $37 trillion in debt that you know nothing about.
True.
So we don't have all these resources, right? We don't have all this money. We're printing fiat currency
That has no backing. You remember, it used to be backed by gold. It's not
Fiat
backed by
currency.
anything now.
and we're letting people think, presenting this image to the world that we're still the beacon of democracy. We're still the most prosperous country on the planet. Yeah, let's be realistic. Resources in this country are not what they were.
See, and I don't even know I don't ever know what they were because I've never been in that seat making decisions about where the money should go. But when you bail out major companies and they don't have to pay back any of those loans because they're too big to fail, and you spend billions of dollars on it, even Obama had to spend billions of dollars bailing out the automotive industry. When you can give tax breaks and tax cuts that cost that
True.
allow, oh, go ahead.
they're in the trillion, $2 trillion he wants to give in a tax break.
Right.
Mhm.
These things to me say that there's a way to create the revenues, but there's people with political agendas that do not want to do that to people that keep putting them in office. And so I don't know what we have, but it seems like when we need something, we miraculously have it. And I'm going to close with this on this economy thing, because what I do see coming is that a long time ago, me and my kids just playing around with Bitcoin and a digital currency. Just threw some little dollars in there just to see what is going on. It was about $50. Well, since Trump's been in office, those things have skyrocketed. I mean, this has been a while. We hadn't seen any movement. Trump has been in office. That has skyrocketed over 120% of gain. So that $50 has turned into about $2,600 for whatever reason. I do think we're moving to where we're weakening the dollar because we're moving into this digital currency space. And Trump is really good for the stocks and bonds people, but not for the everyday working class people. And we're going to see that up close and personal very soon.
Well, you know, they're trying to do away with the dollar. When I say they, I mean the people that control it. And they want to do away with the dollar, and everything's going to go to your credit. Everything's going to be credit.
That's right.
Because you can go places now that they won't take your cash. You got to have a credit card.
Right.
So that's what we're headed for in the future.
And that digital currency market, that's going to be the new face of us if certain people stay in power and they push things over there. Because keep printing dollars is, you go to another country, our dollar is substantially less than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons we've been fighting these preemptive wars is to stave off other currencies like the one that China and India are hoping to produce. It'll come back to me, that particular currency. But Saddam Hussein, who was our, safeguard in the Middle East, he wanted to establish a gold-backed currency. All of a sudden, he became a threat. In Libya, Muammar Gaddafi allocated $70 billion to get Africa out of the World Bank and off the International Monetary Fund, and wanted to establish gold-backed currency. Suddenly, we had to go in and kill him. So what's happening is the dollar's becoming obsolete. It doesn't have the same prestige against, other currencies. In fact, the U.S. dollar ranks around 10th in the world now in terms of its strength. So the value of the dollar has been in free fall for years. I mean, from the time we were kids until now, what can you buy with a dollar anymore?
Right. And that's why they're trying to stop all the safety nets. They're pushing everybody to save for your own retirement. You're not going to have Social Security because everything's going to be in the market, the stocks and bonds market, to push our economic threshold up. So anyone who's not putting into the market is not, you're going to be forgotten about it. You're going to be left behind. That's what this party is. The Democratic Party is providing for those safety nets for people who are not in that hustle and bustling metropolis thing. And I don't know, maybe it's holding people back. Maybe it's not allowed, maybe it's doing too much coddling and not moving people into the new wave of where we're going. Because I do believe people need to get there, even if they don't want to get there. They need to get there because we cannot rely, like you started this, on a government to support us beyond our years after we've put in all this time working, and now we're done and retired and we have nothing. And so this is just where we're going. And I think Democrats need to be better with helping prepare people and move people along the way in some way, because I don't know if it's practical for us to continue with Social Security benefits that actually will allow people to live decently.
The currency I was searching for is the brick. It's the brick.
Right. Yeah. We're going to make that a segue into next week's show. So we're going to have to pick this up, Dr. Yates. We're going to pick this up next week on Tuesday at 5 o'clock. So again, thank you guys for tuning in to GenesisRadio.com. If you always like to give us a call, that would be 888-304-4401. Mrs. Kira Bradford Gray, thank you so much for coming in and being on and always being a friend to us.
Hey, thank you, Kendall and Ron, for the riveting conversation. I always enjoy really great intellectual minds coming together and sparring back and forth. I think that's how we move.
That's how we move.
Thank you so much.
And with that, Mr. Stevenson, Dr. Yates, my brother, peace.
We'll be back next Tuesday.